Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and today it's the most accurate 7-round mock draft you're ever going to find. So accurate, you won't even have to watch the draft. This is what every team is going to pick, every single slot, every single player, because I'm a genius and I'm going to nail this. This is a 7-round mock, and I appreciate you guys coming back. I've been off for a little while working on the deep dive series. Yes, got a chance to watch some games, get some better assessments on certain players, and really working out what the overall grading system is going to be. So I pretty much got a majority of the current players graded. Just waiting to see where they landed and on what team. Super excited about that. So thank you for your patience on that. And now I've been working on the 7-round mock, waiting for the draft order to come in. So it's been an interesting couple of days of figuring that out. We're just going to go team by team, starting with Arizona, ending with Washington. I'll have the chapters in there with every single team, as you'll see below, so you just can skip to your team if you want to do that. Make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already, and leave in the comment section below what you think about what I did with your team, and let's get right to it. So the Cardinals picking at 3 are kind of in an awkward spot because they would have loved to be in play for Fernando Mendoza or for Dante Moore, but they're just not here at 3. So I do have them eventually taking Ty Simpson at 34. I see it as a nice little, like what New Orleans did with Tyler Shook, where you don't reach for the quarterback even if you like him. Take the best player on the board. They take Arvell Reese, which the redundancy with Zaven Collins may be a little too much, but I think that Arvell Reese has enough uniqueness to his game where Zaven Collins is much more of that early down edge type player where you can put as an off ball, and I think Arvell Reese is almost the opposite of that, where he's almost an off ball linebacker on early downs. You make him a passer, so you can almost like mix and match these guys on the field at the same time, maybe a little bit more than people are projecting. And it gives, whoever the new defensive coordinator is going to be there, a nice little piece to work with. You get your rookie quarterback in there, probably going to have a bridge quarterback if they don't keep Kyler Murray. And then adding a couple playmakers, Deion Burks, Mike Washington. That was the one thing Arizona's missing this year, is their ability to make plays. Michael Wilson had a breakout when Marvin Harrison was down. Trey McBride, of course, but outside of that, there wasn't a whole lot of oomph to this offense. So I think adding Washington and Burks gives you a little boost there. They can compete. Burks can compete for like wide receiver 3 positioning there. Adding another edge guy, Logan Fano, just a pure edge guy, get him in there, competition in the front 7. And then adding a couple offensive linemen, a tackle and a guard, just to improve the offensive line, give the offensive line some more depth. You got some impending free agents coming up, some depth pieces that you might need to replace. So it's not the most exciting draft for Arizona. I think they'll be happy. You'd be happy with Arvell Reese. You'd be happy with Ty Simpson in the second round. It's just not the type of draft class that I think this team needs right now, just as from an overall sense. And just because they're out of range here for that top quarterback. Now, there is a world where they get super aggressive, say Kevin Stefanski is their head coach, and they get super aggressive with the Jets, and they convince the Jets to give them the second pick, somehow, some way, and the Jets move back to 3 and take a wide receiver instead or something like that. But it's going to require, I think, a lot. I think Arizona, with whoever the new head coach is, I don't know that with their division right now, the fairness of the expectations is going to be that you're going to come in, you're all of a sudden going to compete. I think looking at Seattle, San Francisco, and the Rams, you're kind of going, okay, we're in a rough spot, so let's just slow boat this maybe, get really good players, develop them, and then catch some of these teams like San Francisco or the Rams on the downturn. Falcons don't have a lot of draft capital coming in, so getting some value here. Wide receiver Jeremy Bernard, cornerback Davison Igbunasum from Ohio State. Jake Endry's the tight end, going to replace Kyle Pitts, who's probably going to be going somewhere else. Adding another offensive lineman, just some depth there towards the end of the draft. getting another edge guy in there, just some more depth from that perspective. But for Atlanta, it's just, you kind of, whoever your head coach is going to be tasked with making Michael Penix work here in Penix's third year. And if it doesn't, then you're going to have to be probably more aggressive in the next draft, because you're in this position where your team is too good to be a bottom 10 team in the league, obviously. So you're kind of going to be out of range for the top quarterback. So kind of like what they had to do last year, where they gave a first-round pick to get James Pierce. They're probably going to have to do something similar in the next draft in order to pull off the quarterback spot, which seems to be the missing piece, because Drake London's really good. They got a good running game. The offensive line is actually pretty good, all things considered. Bergeron and Jake Matthews and Chris Lindstrom. It's a good little group that they got. So it's just about getting the right pieces around there so that eventually either Michael Penix develops and becomes that middle-of-the-pack quarterback that he was kind of what his ceiling was, or they're in a position where they can drop a more high-upside quarterback into the situation and have a lot more success. The division is very winnable. They still almost won the division despite how bad they were playing for most of the year. So the division in itself is on the downturn. I think the Saints are maybe coming up there a little bit. Carolina got a little bit better, but it's still a division that's well within their range. So I think getting a good head coach in place, getting the right pieces in free agency, and getting value here in the draft can actually put Atlanta in play to be divisional champions next year, despite not having the strongest group. The Baltimore Ravens, disappointing season. Injuries really hurt them. Apparently there's issues with Lamar Jackson. I'm not going to just assume a Lamar Jackson trade here. But wouldn't it be interesting if Lamar Jackson got traded to the Raiders and they ended up with the first overall pick for it? I mean, say it's crazy, but there is a world where that could possibly happen. Apparently, allegedly. But let's assume that's not the case. Baltimore, they have very specific strategies when they come into drafts. I think in this position now, they're going to do what Baltimore does, and they're going to focus on positions of value in the trenches. So TJ Parker and Emmanuel Pergon immediately come in, and those are starters right away. In the trenches, offensive line, defensive line, they really need something off the edge. Dafioe never really worked out. David Ajabo never really got over those injuries. Like Kyle Van Noy's your best edge rusher, and he's like 75 years old. So get somebody younger in there. I think TJ Parker's got a lot of balance to his game. Pergon, sort of same thing. Probably the best, top two true interior offensive lineman in the draft. Comes in, starts immediately. Don't really need to worry about him being the best offensive lineman either. You got some good offensive linemen in there. Dominique Orange comes in, interior defensive line. You're going to lose Travis Jones, I think. Did they extend Travis Jones? They might have extended Travis Jones. Oh my God, Baltimore Ravens fans are screaming at their computer screens right now because I might have forgot. Even if they did, they still really need to improve the interior defensive line. I think getting a more strong rotation is essential for them. He did sign an extension, 3-year, $41 million extension on December 11th. I knew it. But notwithstanding, I still think a late day 2 pick, mid day 2 pick isn't exactly like overreaching here for a team that, Nnamdi Madubuike hasn't been the same since he got his contract year. So getting another guy on that interior is going to help out the back end. It's going to help out these edge rushers and keep guys like Jones fresh and Madubuike fresh, and you can go into more base formations this way. You get Xavier Scott, safety. It's a team that likes to use safeties, deep defensive backs here, adding Devin Moore. Justin Jefferson, not that one. Linebacker from Alabama, adding him to the defense. They're probably more of a special teams guy at that point. Same thing with Bariga Kepnu from North Dakota State, the running back. But, you get Trevor Locke in there. Sneaky tackle, development tackle. What's going on with Ronnie Stanley at his age and his regressions. Brennan Thompson and Justin Jolly there. Some day 3 weapons, so to speak. Adding to the wide receiver room, getting another tight end in there, Mark Andrews. I know that he's going to be around for a while longer, but how do you keep Kolar and Isaiah Likely? What's that money going to look like? I really like Justin Jolly. So it could be a smoother transition throughout that tight end room. Adding a guy like Jolly who, could work out at the end of the day. And if he doesn't, it's the 173rd pick in the draft. I think it's when you get to these areas, you're kind of like swinging for, some good depth pieces, some possible diamonds in the rough that could be contributors down the line. So I think Jolly and Thompson sort of fit that mold for them. But this draft, I think, really suits what Baltimore likes to do. I think Baltimore likes these trenches, linemen, type picks, and they get a whole bunch of opportunities here to swing at those positions. Buffalo Bills up next. Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher from Auburn. I think he's like 6'4", 285. He's a massive man. So he's somebody you can kick inside and pass downs. He's not really a great pass rushing edge, but he's really good against the run. So I think he can be part of this group where you can be a nice early down edge player, kick him inside with Ed Oliver for pass rushing situations when you want to get a little bit smaller. I think he'd match up a lot better against NFL guards than he would tackles as it currently stands. But you can also develop these aspects to his game. There's no real rush there. Buffalo's done a good job of creating a nice rotation of edge players. Zachariah Branch, wide receiver from Georgia. They were heavy in the trade deadline for wide receivers, so I expect them to take one with one of their first 2 picks. Torrin York, linebacker, Texas A&M, adding to that group as well. Terry Moore on the back end, sneaky guy who can come in and maybe win a starting job. Hezekiah Masses, cornerback out of Cal, more of a depth piece there. And then some interior linemen on the offensive defensive side of the ball. Fill out some depth there. Maybe find a cheap rotational option for the season. The overachieving Carolina Panthers, they grabbed Sonny Styles in the first round. Now, him falling to 19 he has an interesting draft range. He's somebody that can go, I think, as high as inside the top 10. And I think this is his floor, obviously. So in this situation, he kind of achieved his floor with other teams going in different directions with different picks. Tight end Max Clare, I know, we don't need a tight end. You need some more weapons out there. You need some more weapons, and when you have a guy like Bryce Young, you want guys who are a little bit bigger, have a little bit more of a catch radius. So I think that's the type of move you need to make here. Caleb Tiernan, I think the value was too good there at 83 not to take him. You're probably going to lose Brady Christensen in free agency. You're going to lose some of these offensive linemen in free agency. Carolina sneaky good on the offensive line. They had about 7 starting caliber players on this offensive line. Brady Christensen, like I said, is going to be gone. So I think worst case scenario here in the 3rd round, you got a guy like Caleb Tiernan who can be your 3rd tackle. And fill in injury situations. Maybe he develops into something where you can then move on from a bigger contract like Taylor Moton, who's getting up there in years as well. Derek Moore joins the edge rotation. You took Squirtin and Umana Malayan last year. You want to add to that group. I feel like you kind of can throw these options here at this edge room, and then you sort of just play the best players as they land. Mac Golbin, another interior offensive lineman. Like I said, you're going to be losing some offensive linemen to starting jobs on other teams, and then just getting passing. Think of the passing game. Cam Shanks, the wide receiver, and then Kennedy and Dalton Brooks in your secondary. I would have loved to have added players to this Carolina secondary. I feel like they need playmakers back there. The draft just didn't really work out that way, so it'll be interesting to see what this team does in free agency and what their success this year does for their overall appeal to veterans in the free agency market. Is Carolina a desirable spot to go? Is Ejiro Evero going to be there? Are defensive players going to be drawn to that? Are some of the more high-end weapons that are going to hit free agency going to be having some sort of appeal to Dave Canales and Bryce Young? that is going to be something to really watch in the offseason, because I feel like there's so many other teams out there that have more appeal than Carolina, so they might be kind of stuck in this purgatory this offseason. The Chicago Bears, another team that overachieved, I feel, just by a little bit, winning the division. I don't think it's anything somebody predicted. I think maybe people thought they had a chance to be a playoff team, but to win the division, win against the teams that they did, how they did it, it was really strong. And I think that they're going to want, the offense is in a really good situation right now across the board. So you kind of want to add to the defensive side, I feel, and get some value picks here. So you add Caleb Banks, Caden Curry to your defensive line. You know, you had Austin Booker out there, you got Montez Sweat. Adding Caden Curry in there, get like a third rotational guy in there. Caleb Banks on the interior with Gervin Dexter and that. I think you can really make this defensive line really strong by investing in the first 2 days of this draft. And then AJ Halsey, a safety, get some help there on the back end. I think you've got a really nice group here for the defense. I think this really rounds out your team overall. And now Dennis Allen is going to have this great little defensive group here with some young developmental players like this to mix in with some of the vets that they have. You know, you add Damani Jackson to the cornerback room, and then you're just adding depth to the offense. You know, Damon Claiborne at running back. He comes in, he's running back 3 right now. But do you feel good about Kyle Monangai to be a starter, and then maybe Claiborne comes in and fills in the number 2 spot while you clear up money by not having DeAndre Swift on the roster, even though Swift had a great season. JC Davis, you know, compete, maybe make the roster as offensive lineman number 9. And then Trent Walker from Oregon State, wide receiver. Again, you're looking at wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 spot for him. Could open up some more opportunities depending on what they decide to do with DJ Moore. If they feel like Luther Burden can fill that role more effectively for a cheaper rate, him and Roma Dunze moving forward, and then DJ Moore ends up somebody else, maybe that opens up more opportunities for like a day 3 wide receiver, and they hope to land like maybe a Puka Nacua situation. The Cincinnati Bengals, sort of the same problem they've had the last couple of years, is the defense and the offensive line. The offensive line is getting Joe Burrow killed, and the defense isn't stopping anybody. So what do? You add probably the best defensive player in the whole draft, Caleb Downs, to safety. Is safety a high-value position? No. What do all the great defenses in the league have? A strong, versatile safety. Caleb Downs has the opportunity to be this draft's Kyle Hamilton. You got to take him in this scenario. You still get your edge player, Mateo Uiagalelei, later, so he can mix in there depending on what you're doing with Trey Hendrickson. Maybe you decide to pay Trey Hendrickson. Maybe you see that this defense struggles like hell and you need strong veteran players. If not, Uiagalelei still gets drafted, I think, either way. You add Blake Miller. Again, the value is really strong. To get Blake Miller at tackle, you need tackles. Ahmad Moten, interior defensive lineman, add to the defensive line. Brent Austin, safety. Isaiah Jada, another tackle. Eric McAllister, just, you know, another guy to add to the wide receiver room, as you got Chase, you got Higgins, you know, Iosivas, but Iosivas, you know, sort of up and down, you know, not really sure if he's a quality wide receiver 3 on a consistent basis. Get some competition in there. You can never have enough weapons, especially if you're just taking them there on day 3. But I think with the key picks they have, those first 4 picks, they're adding to the groups that they really need the most help in, that they need the most immediate turnover in. And Zach Taylor's still the head coach. Don't know what they're doing at the defensive coordinator spot. If they just, again, have a third defensive coordinator in 3 years, I might recommend it. Try to find, throw money at a very strong defensive candidate. Even one of these guys that just got fired from a head coaching spot, like a Raheem Morris, even Jonathan Gannon, get a strong defensive coordinator in this room, because you haven't had one in a long time. And I think adding these types of players could really help that, move that defense along, and at least get them to a level where they're not forcing the offense to be an all-timer every single week in order to win. So the Cleveland Browns are here, and again, can they tempt the Jets to get to number 2? Because everyone's talking about, Shador played great, Shador played well. Shador and Dylan Gabriel didn't really play all that differently. Like Shador had his defense win him 2 games, including the last game of the season. He looked like the better quarterback, but not by some significant margin where you're not going to at least have the conversation about maybe giving up that 28th overall pick and maybe even pick 39 to go up to 2 if the Jets are kind of lukewarm on taking a quarterback this year. But let's say they don't. Take the best offensive lineman on the board, Spencer Fano, and then get a wide receiver in Kevin Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M there at the end of the first round. Add to the offense. Your defense is fantastic. You got a great defensive coach who, even if a new offensive coordinator comes in, even a new offensive-minded head coach comes in, Jim Schwartz will stick around. He's earned the right to be the defensive coordinator there and to just be picked up by whoever the next head coach is if he's not just named the new head coach. Malik Muhammad, cornerback depth, Kamari Ramsey, adding some depth to the secondary because as good as the defense was, the secondary I still feel could have used a little bit of extra. So I think you can add a little bit of extra there. Now the elephant in the room is Drew Aller at 107. Like I was talking about with the quarterbacks, it's tough. Shador, Dylan Gabriel, Drew Aller. I think you get 3 guys, get in there, let them compete. May the best man win. Maybe Shador, maybe Drew Aller. Might not be Dylan Gabriel. I think people also discount too much left-handed quarterbacks. Left-handed quarterbacks are at an extreme disadvantage because most quarterbacks are right-handed. Most offenses are designed for right-handed quarterbacks. So that does kind of change things up in how you strategize your play calling week to week, your formations and all that. How your offensive line gets put together. Little things like that can go a long way. But I think you compete. Drew Aller's a good athlete. I think if he didn't get injured this year, I think people would talk about him maybe a little bit higher. But we'll see. I was really high on Drew Aller last year coming into the season this year. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening with him. Adding some depth to the defensive line, Tariq Sapp, DeMonte Capehart, Ty Morris at linebacker, Carson Schweschinger, probably defensive rookie of the year. But what's happening with JOK? Adam Randall, depth running back, probably just a special teams guy. And Kalen Rutledge could be like a sneaky day 3 guy who wins a starting job. Because there's going to be a lot of turnover on this offensive line. So for all intents and purposes, Spencer Fano and Kalen Rutledge could both be starters next year for the Cleveland Browns. So it's depending on what they do with Bitonio and Wyatt Teller and the plethora of impending free agents they have. And just an offensive line that overall isn't that strong anyway with those 2 guys. So the turnover, there's going to be a lot of open opportunities here for some young rookies getting drafted this year to actually win starting jobs immediately in Cleveland. The Dallas Cowboys, who, not for nothing, I had them as in my power rankings deep dive series as the number 30 team. I think they were 31 after the Parsons trade. And though they weren't as bad, they were still not a great team this year, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that's why the 2 picks they do have here in the first round, Reuben Bain and CJ Allen, they're going right to the defense. Quinnen Williams is going to be there. Kenny Clark is going to be there. Osa Digizua. You add Reuben Bain. You add CJ Allen. You got Logan Wilson. You could have a very sneaky good front 7 going into next season with these 2 moves. Problem is, you don't really have a 2nd round pick. No 3rd round pick. So we get to the 4th round. Katron Allen, day 3 running back. What are you doing with Javonte Williams? Blue had a decent week 17. He had showed some stuff there, but the Giants' defense is incredibly weak. So it's hard to really get a fair assessment there. Demetrius Crownover, hometown, home state boy for some offensive line depth. Same thing with Charles Jagusa there for the interior. Adam Graves, again, depth piece. Bryce Lance to the wide receiver room. Charles Demings to cornerbacks. This is another team where I would probably like to have added a secondary player earlier on, but, with C.J. Allen and Reuben Bain there, it's kind of hard to pass up on those guys because those are positions that you're going to need as well. So it'll be interesting to see what Dallas' secondary looks like next season, how they add guys in free agency, kind of opportunities they're going to open up for guys that they draft to compete. Someone like a Charles Demings from Stephen F. Austin, what does that look like when he gets there? It's potentially going to be a really weak group, but with a really weak group on paper, it opens up a lot of opportunities for breakout stars as well. So there is like a pros and cons aspect to that for Dallas. The Denver Broncos up next. I'm going with Amari Washington in the end of the first round. There just wasn't really guys there that I could see them really leaping at. That's an awkward position for them to be drafting in. With all the receivers gone, Sadiq is gone, and 2 linebackers gone. Still got him grabbing Jake Golden and Omar Cooper in the second and third round. Got him grabbing Jamari Johnson, the tight end, in the fourth. So you still get those guys, and Amari Washington's just, he's a good piece to add to the interior of the defensive line. Somebody who can come in, play next to Zach Allen, and I think have a lot of success. Malachi Lawrence on the edge, Jermaine Matthews to the cornerback room, and then just adding a couple offensive linemen there late in the draft. Matthew Bailey from Illinois could be a good special teams player potentially. But Denver's got such a great roster. They got such a great roster. I think they're going to be a very desirable place for free agents in the offseason. So they're another team where it's going to be very interesting to see what their offseason ends up looking like in terms of a roster management perspective. And also, is Vance Joseph going to be a head coach somewhere else? There's a possibility of that. So what does your defensive coordinator look like? Maybe he needs certain different defensive pieces out there. Maybe he needs a guy in the secondary early that sort of more fits his scheme than what they have right now with Moss and Jahdae Barron, who they took in the first round. Maybe Moss is sort of an odd man out potentially, even though I think he's really strong. System-wise, he might not be. Safeties on the back end. What's that? How's that going to turn out for them? There are some possibilities here for the Broncos on the defensive side to make some interesting draft picks here that sort of shift the direction of what we think the defense is currently on trajectory-wise. Extremely disappointing Detroit Lions, who finished last in the NFC North. I don't know anyone expected that. So I'm going with Francis Mauigoa from Miami. Tackle, potentially a guard. I can see him coming in, being the right tackle, Penei Sewell going to left, and Taylor Decker being done for. There's a world where that's true. There's a world where Mauigoa is a guard and eventually goes to tackle when Decker eventually leaves, and Penei Sewell goes to left tackle. Julian Neal, cornerback from Arkansas. Throw another body out there. You've got some injury concerns at the cornerback room. You got to get some guys in position for that group. Danny Dennis Sutton, edge rusher. This is a huge value pick at 118. I think the edge class is really strong this year. So even getting a guy here at 118, you can accomplish a lot, get him a lot of reps during a game. Some interior linemen, Cade Piper, David Oke. Josh Cameron, the wide receiver. You got Daquan Wright, tight end. Drake Bowen, a depth linebacker. It'll be interesting to see if Kelvin Shepard's still your defensive coordinator come next season. There's a possibility that he's not. I think there should be a lot of turnover at the coordinator roles. We'll see what that turns out for Detroit, but they got a really strong roster. They just got to get the coaching aspect from a coordinator perspective down. Green Bay, not a lot of high-end draft depth, you'll say. Chandler Rivers, cornerback Duke. Austin Sehfereld, offensive lineman, tackle/guard from Ohio State. I think those are two really key pieces that make this, I think, a strong, successful draft for them. Just because it fills two needs. Sehfereld comes in, competes. Again, best 5 play. Chandler Rivers fills out a relatively weak cornerback room. I got Anthony Lucas there. Edge player, again, the edge class is just so good, the value just sort of becomes too much to pass up on, even when you got Micah Parsons, who with Micah Parsons' injury, probably isn't going to be ready for week 1. You got Sheridan Wilson, interior offensive lineman, again, throwing assets at the offensive line. Wesley Matthews, interior defensive line. Moore and Nestor, secondary players, probably just going to be special teams guys, but some depth nonetheless. And I got them adding Taylon Green, the quarterback. They're going to lose Malik Willis to somebody. Somebody's paying Malik Willis this year. Somebody's trading for him or signing him, whichever scenario. So you need a backup quarterback. Just sort of throwing one at the wall there. Houston Texans, red hot at the end of the season, but still need some help on the offensive side. That's why I got him going with Vega Ione, the guard, Jennings Dunker, the tackle/guard from Iowa, and Jadarian Prince, the running back from Notre Dame there, with 3 of their first 4 picks. They can be instant impact guys. They need the offensive line help. They need the running back help. Woody Marks ended up being the starting running back when they had Mixon and Chubb. So maybe Marks and Prince become a good 1-2 punch for you. At least a reliable one, with the improvement on the offensive line. Christian Miller, defensive tackle from Georgia, throwing him in there as well. Though the defense is really strong, defensive line off the edge was really strong. Help out with the interior, help out with the run defense. Eli Stowers, Eric Singleton, some more offensive weapons out there. There's a lot of injury concerns for the Texans on the offensive side. So I think making sure that you have some more depth players is essential for them. Jair Hill, cornerback, can be like a corner 3, corner 4. Rolder and Fitzgerald, special teams guys, depth for the linebacker and back end at safety. But I think using some of your more high upside draft capital on key offensive positions like this is what's best for Houston going forward, because it seems like they got the defensive personnel and the defensive strategy down to an absolute perfection of science. So got to get some more help on the offensive side. CJ Stroud, Nico Collins can't really do it all on their own. The Indianapolis Colts, of course, don't have a first round pick. They got Sauce Gardner. I still think it's a good trade. 16th overall pick, you get Sauce Gardner. I'm okay with that. Still need help though in the secondary. Dylan Thieneman there at 47. You miss out on Ty Simpson early, like we said at the beginning of this video. So you got to get a quarterback in there. Cade Klubnik at 78. Again, it's a swing in the 3rd round. You actually got a really good roster. The quarterback positions just kind of fell apart on you there, second half of the season. So you just got to figure that spot out. Richardson, does he develop under, finally, does it make sense? Daniel Jones, does he come back able to play? Or is this just another 2022 Daniel Jones situation? But then you have Klubnik come in, compete. Find the best option at quarterback, the most high floor option at quarterback. And it looks like the rest of your roster is going to be able to carry the load here. Harold Perkins at linebacker. They need linebacker. And then adding some lineman depth on both sides of the ball. Zune, Hecht, Regis. And then Aaron Anderson, wide receiver. Position of value. You don't know what's happening with the wide receiver room exactly. With Pittman and Alec Pierce. And so maybe you get, again, a late draft pick that can be an impact player for you throughout a season. Jacksonville doesn't have a first round pick either. Don't think they regret it. They were great this year, but they still need some help. So they add, on the defensive side of the ball, Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety from Toledo. He's more of a box safety. Dante Corleone, interior defensive lineman, just crowd the middle of the field with him and Devon Hamilton. Justice Hayes, good little running back 2 to bring in with Travis Etienne. Gabe Jackas from Illinois, the edge rusher. I actually like him to be a sneaky edge 3 on this team. Compete with Travon Walker for more traditional pass rushing downs. Brian Parker, love him as a right tackle. Come and be tackle 3 for you. Stukes and Daniels, a guy for the secondary, another receiver out there. Even though they're strong at wide receiver, Jane Stukes can compete, get some reps. And then just some depth, depth tight end, depth offensive lineman. But again, a roster that turned out to be much stronger than I think people expected. So depending on what they do with their current roster in terms of re-signing guys, there may not be a whole lot of holes on this roster next season. Boy, oh boy, the Kansas City Chiefs. It feels so good that they were so bad. But I got to be fair to them. Got to make sure you draft well for them. And Peter Woods, interior defensive lineman, play him next to Chris Jones. R. Mason Thomas, edge rusher, opposite George Karlaftis. Really improves that front four immediately. A team that, for some reason kind of needed everything on the defensive side of the ball, especially with some impending free agents as well. They got to rebuild this running game. You get Emmett Johnson, the running back from Nebraska. You miss out on Jeremiah Love. And then it's kind of just, might as well wait till the third round, take a running back, and then work from there. Cage Casey, good tackle from Boise State. Could be a sneaky right tackle option for next season. Carlos Hernandez, good depth wide receiver. And Isaiah Brown Murray, some depth corner help. Not a lot of draft capital, only 6 picks. Be interested to see how they move around the draft board. Do they feel like this year was an anomaly where they just kind of underachieved? And do they get super aggressive with a pick in the top 10 and make a massive trade to get somebody particularly special? We'll see what that looks like. Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, that type of player. We'll still see, but I think that they can get a lot of instant help if they just sort of stick and pick the way I have them doing here. And here are the Vegas Raiders, and we know they're going quarterback number 1. I got them going with Mendoza, and then the second round they take Mendoza's wide receiver 1, Elijah Surratt. So you just bring the Indiana 1-2 punch in immediately. There you go. Isaiah World at offensive tackle. So investing in the offensive side of the ball, incredibly important for the Raiders this year. I could almost guarantee they get an offensive-minded head coach. I don't know that they're going to be bringing in a rookie quarterback at number 1 overall and not have an offensive-minded head coach, or at the very least a really strong offensive coordinator like Brian Daboll. Keontae Scott, a really, really good slot corner, especially against the run. He'd be a real weapon in that sense. Damon Wilson, adding some edge depth. Zakee Wheatley, safety depth. Iapani Laulolu, the other Oregon offensive lineman, this one on the interior, adding him to this group. Kevin Coleman, another wide receiver. Boubacar Traore from Notre Dame, another edge talent. Because you don't really know what's happening with Max Crosby, do you? Max Crosby, he's either going to be a huge feature on this team. I guess it depends who the head coach is. And then at 219, Aiden Fisher, linebacker, depth piece, special teams guy. Potential stealing a lot of starting reps. Who knows? But the Raiders have so many roster holes that it's not out of reason for every single one of these guys drafted to be an impact player for this team in their rookie seasons. Chargers don't have a lot of draft capital, so I just did what I feel Jim Harbaugh does, which is he's focusing on old school football. So I got 2 defensive linemen, Caden McDonald and LT Overton, adding them to the defensive line, and then Connor Lew and Austin Barber adding them to the offensive line. Just old school, hard-nosed Jim Harbaugh football for the Chargers. And then Jerry Wilson, just a depth guy, probably a special teams player towards the end. But, not a lot of draft picks, only 5. But taking advantage of the first 2 days in particular, getting yourself 3 starters. Really, 3 starters. Here are the Rams, and the quarterback position didn't really land the way they wanted to in this draft, probably. So just hammer the Super Bowl window. Tremont McCoy at corner, Caden Proctor at tackle, two starting players right there, both sides of the ball. Lee Hunter, a really strong option on the interior defensive line with Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk. Jake Slaughter, a sneaky potential starter for your offensive line on the interior. Carson Beck, who's had some hype in the past. You know, you kind of just take a flyer out on him there in 4th, 5th round, whatever that is. You know, maybe going to lose Jimmy Garoppolo to a team that's looking for a bridge quarterback anyway, so maybe you get something in Carson Beck sitting behind Matthew Stafford for a year or two. And then it's just adding depth players, potential special teams assets here. Arian Carter, Jamison Greer, VJ Payne, J. Michael Sturdivant, and Yanze Pierre. From good, strong programs, Alabama, Florida, Tennessee. Hopefully high character guys. Get them on your special teams, have them be depth players. But hammer the Super Bowl window with those first 3 rounds. The Miami Dolphins, they need a lot of help. Like, I'm going with Mansour Delaney at corner, then Chris Brazell at wide receiver. They're probably going to be a team that has a bridge quarterback. That's not Tua. Again, they're out of range for Moore and Mendoza. They miss Ty Simpson in the 2nd round. Had Arizona taken him before that pick 43. So why not Garrett Nussmeier? A guy who, again, had some hype, kind of like Carson Beck. Is still kind of viewed as a day 2 pick. So you can bring him in. It's a low risk. He competes with whatever bridge quarterback he got. If he loses out, it's just a 3rd round pick. Then you take Logan Parr and Max Ioniker, 2 offensive linemen. You need some offensive line help. A little bit. Not as much as you'd think, but you need it. Jalen Kilgore in the secondary can play safety, can play in the slot, can play outside corner. It's a good little piece to mix in there. Joe Royer, the tight end. Don't really have a tight end. Darren Waller, I guess, kind of was whatever. Jamarian Miller, depth running back, special teams guy. But Miami's got to turn around. They got to turn around by figuring out that quarterback position. So this is either a Seattle Seahawks when they drafted Russell Wilson scenario with Garrett Nussmeier, or they're picking in the top 10 again and have to be super aggressive to get a young blue chip quarterback next year. Minnesota Vikings, you got J.J. McCarthy. They said they're probably going to bring in a vet to compete. But you got to focus on J.J. That's why I haven't taken Kenyon Sadiq at 18. I know they got T.J. Hawkinson. They probably won't have T.J. Hawkinson next year. I like the idea of moving on from T.J. Hawkinson, filling in with Kenyon Sadiq. Now, Kenyon Sadiq does have that O.J. Howard sort of aura on top of him. Great athlete, not a lot of production. Will a team use his athleticism and feel like they're smarter than the University of Oregon in terms of how they use Kenyon Sadiq? Huge possibility this all blows up in their face. But he's coming in where he's weapon number 3 in this scenario. Potentially 4 with Jalen Naylor. Kelly Jones and Genesis Smith, some depth in the secondary. Secondary they need help in. Probably not keeping Brian Flores, so probably need to get a little bit more depth on the back end because you're not going to be as inventive. You're probably going to be a little more bland strategically on defense because it's hard to get more exotic and more aggressive than Brian Flores. Nick Singleton, sneaky running back in here to compete for a starting job with Jordan Mason. Then again, depth players here. Lander Barton, Kieran Crawford, Trevor Piva, Alex Harkey. Potential just depth guys to have on this roster. But you got to take big swings again, first couple rounds, to get yourself over this hump, help out J.J. McCarthy. Because for all intents and purposes, this is the last year for him to prove that he's a starting quarterback in the NFL before they need to move on. The always fun New England Patriots, and what a year for them. So I got him taking Caleb Lomu, offensive lineman. Get him to play right tackle. Him and Will Campbell, the bookend tackles there for Drake May. Zion Young comes in, traditional edge player from Missouri. Malachi Fields, add to that wide receiver room. Jayshon Barham, sort of like a linebacker edge hybrid type player. I think Vrabel would really love having him. Oscar Delp, tight end from Georgia. They're a little old in the tight end room, so I think adding to that tight end room could be really good for them. Help out, again, Drake May. Secondary help with Hubbard and Marshall. And then those 7th round, those late 6th, 7th round picks, getting Grayson Holden and Rashawn Benny on the interior defensive line, Armaj Reed Adams interior offensive line, and then Darius Taylor, the running back, who, for all intents and purposes, could be running back too, with Travion Henderson next year. You never know. You know, this thing with Vrabel and the sort of coaching tree he comes from, no one's better at finding value late in the draft. So Hubbard to Reed Adams, I'm almost more excited about than Lomu to Delp, which is an odd feeling to have, but if anyone's going to find success in the 6th and 7th round, it's going to be Vrabel and the Patriots. Now, I wish I recorded this earlier, because I did have this done for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden, I wasn't the only one looking at the New Orleans Saints and saying, I'm pretty sure they're taking Jeremiah Love at number 8. Just how the draft is seemingly going to fall. Because you love Tyler Shook. You love what that looks like. You got Alvin Kamara, who's getting older. If you want to get the best out of him, get him a compliment. Maybe even bump him down to running back 2, like a high-end running back 2, like a David Montgomery role. And get your Jahmyr Gibbs and Jeremiah Love for Tyler Shook. Then you need another option opposite of Chris Olave. You get Chris Bell from Louisville. Then you can look at the defense after. Joshua Josephs, the edge class is really strong. So getting Joshua Josephs in the 3rd round, any other year, Joshua Joseph is a top 40 pick. So you're getting a strong guy here in the 3rd round for your edge room. Dalen Everett, cornerback. Lost to Debo last year. Probably going to lose Alontae Taylor this year. You need to replenish that group. Some interior linemen here, Zane Durant, Parker Bracefield, offensive and defensive side of the ball. Again, could be instant impact players. The other Devin Neal. You got running back Devin Neal. Now you got safety Devin Neal. Again, sneaky. Could get some reps. Could get some starting time. Suntrain Perkins. What's happened with DeMario Davis? Is he sticking around? Or are you just going to have Pete Werner now as your linebacker? You could find a day 3 linebacker that could fill in as a linebacker 2 for you. Because I also think with the Saints is they were in such salary cap hell for so long. I feel like the fact they feel like they got their quarterback now, which they should, now it's like, okay, let's move on from some of these big veteran contracts. Let's stop doing the whole kick the can down the road thing and screwing ourselves up every other year. And let's get some good players in there, some instant impact players that can help us so we can move on from some bigger contracts. And I think this is what they did in this scenario. Now we got my New York Giants, and at 5, Carnell Tate. Pretty straightforward. Jackson Dart's your quarterback. Cam Scatteraboo and Tyrone Tracy is your running back group. Malik Neighbors is wide receiver 1. Please bring back Wan'Dale Robinson. And then Carnell Tate's your other outside wide receiver. And you are set for offensive weaponry. Keith Abney comes in cornerback. Please get Deonte Banks out of my life. He's the worst cornerback in the entire league. There's a possibility they'll bring back Cordell Flott. But even if they do, I still feel like they need some corner depth. They need high-end corners, and I think Keith Abney coming in, he could compete for a starting role. Linebacker Jacob Rodriguez, even if they keep Okereke, I think it's important to get another linebacker in there. Mike McFadden just feels like if they do bring him back, the injury concerns are just a little too much for me. I think Jacob Rodriguez could be a real steal late day 2, early day 3 for a team. Adding some lineman depth, Jude Bowery at tackle, Jane Roberts on the interior offensive line, Lane Robinson on the interior defensive line from Navy, and then another wide receiver, a depth wide receiver, Nick Anderson, assuming that we're going to be losing some combination of Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, hopefully not Wan'Dale, Isaiah Hodgins, Gunnar Olszewski. Like, there's just a lot of turnover that seems to be potentially happening in the wide receiver room. So getting 2 guys, I think, is the correct move here. And what are they going to do in free agency? I think, especially depending if they get a really great head coach, they could be a team that I think maybe has the most appeal for a veteran looking to join a young, ascending football team, where they can be an impact player, but also not be part of like a full-on rebuild, like where a team is on the downward trend. The Giants are certainly now on the upward trend with Jackson Dart. So here are the New York Jets. A lot of picks, a lot of needs. We'll call it that. Them picking at 2, if Dante Moore declares, this has to be the pick. Aaron Glenn is getting a second year. Boy, were they bad on defense, but boy, were they bad on offense as well. One of the worst offensive teams I've ever seen. So you get Dante Moore, you get Mekhi Lemon. Instantly get Garrett Wilson, a distraction to get those double coverages off him permanently. And you get a quarterback who can sling it like Dante Moore. Then you need to shift your focus to the defense. Absolutely. 0 interceptions in 17 games. I think they're the only team in NFL history that did that. 0. So you get Anthony Hill at linebacker. You need a new linebacker 1. Pair him up with Jamian Sherwood. Chris Johnson, the corner from San Diego State. Get a strong starting caliber corner early. He's your replacement for Sauce Gardner. Look to add more secondary help with veterans in free agency. Not a highly sought after free agency landing spot. But they're going to have to be aggressive, spend a lot of money. Darrell Jackson, interior defensive line. You're going to need some depth there. Quinton Williams is gone. You need some guys to come in and play there. Then you're looking at just depth players in general. Logan Jones on the offensive line. Anto Saka as an edge rusher. Potentially could compete for a starting job. You don't know what's going on with Jermaine Johnson yet. Tristan Lee for tackle. You got 2 really good tackles. Fashanu and Membu. Still need some depth there. Tristan Lee there late in the draft. Could be that. Then you get Tanner Koziel. Could be a special teams guy. Colin Wright could be a special teams guy. Le'Veon Moss could be a depth running back special teams guy as well. But you got to hit on those 4 picks you have in the top 44. You have to hit. If you miss on these picks, it's an even more long-term disaster because of what you gave up to ensure that you had these picks. The Philadelphia Eagles and how to get in the mind of Howie Roseman. Well, you draft linemen. That's how you do it. Cassius Howell at edge. I think size, length could be an issue for him, but I think the Eagles would love to have him, especially when they have some other really good players on their defensive line as it is. Chris Adams as a guy to come in, compete at guard. Will Lee, a cornerback, add some depth to that group. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, what a pairing. But you can still use some more. At 98, Antonio Williams, fast slot wide receiver. I think a good complement to what they have with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Drew Shelton, depth offensive tackle. Anthony Smith, depth interior defensive lineman. Eli Raridan from Notre Dame, the tight end. Sneaky replacement for Dallas Goedert. Watch for that. I do think Tanner McKee is probably going to get traded. Or if he's not already a free agent, some team looking for a bridge quarterback or a high-end backup to compete with, to be there while they have a young quarterback. I think he's a great option for a lot of teams. I think teams will take him, especially because the offense has to change too much when he comes in compared to when Jalen Hurts is in. 2 completely different players. And I think John Mateer, from an athletic profile, suits what they do on offense more than Tanner McKee does. Now, so Tanner McKee might be a better passer. Tanner McKee might be a better overall quarterback at the end of the day, potentially. But I think John Mateer fits this team a lot more and can be a really solid backup to Jalen Hurts and develop behind him. Depth safety there, special teams guy, Nwankpa from Iowa. It's just, when you have such a strong roster, you just sort of add to positions, keep strengths to strength, get guy number 3 and 4. That really solidifies the group. So when you do pick up injuries, easily replaceable. Howie Roseman, he just knows what he's doing. I don't know how else to put it. And now the AFC North champions, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do anticipate Aaron Rodgers coming back. Absolutely. But I don't think that takes them out of the quarterback market. I think picking 21st takes them out of the quarterback market. So they take Colton Hood. They need corner help. They definitely need that. They definitely need some defensive backs there to pair up with Joey Porter and Jalen Ramsey. Let Jalen Ramsey maybe play a little bit more safety and slot work. They need more wide receivers. Get Jacoby Lane, big body wide receiver from USC. Huge compliment to DK Metcalf. Get 2 giant bodies running down there. Darnell Washington at tight end. And you may have the largest wide receiver weapons room for Aaron Rodgers. The catch radiuses of these guys, mixing it in with Aaron Rodgers' level of precision and accuracy. Good luck. Trinidad Chambliss there in the 3rd round. He played himself into a day 2 pick, I think. And I think him coming in, starting as a backup, sitting behind Aaron Rodgers for at least a year, could do him a lot of good. And then just sort of dropping him into a tried and ready offense could be the perfect situation for him. Carter Smith, a tackle from Indiana. He's going to compete at one of these tackle spots because there is some weaknesses on this offensive line. KP Price, safety, some more defensive back help. They need the depth on the defensive backside. Josiah Trotter, can compete for some linebacker reps, be linebacker 3 at least. LJ Martin, get into that running back room. You're still looking for a long-term option. Gainwell and Jalen Warren were a great 1-2 punch this year. But you have Caleb Johnson in there. You get LJ Martin. You have some competition back there for running back 3. Or if Kenneth Gainwell ends up leaving, running back 2. Greg Johnson, DJ Campbell, some interior offensive lineman depth. Lawson Lucky, another tight end. I like it. We need more tight ends. Maybe. It's a fun thought. Worst case scenario is a special teams guy along with Chris McClellan and Patrick Payton. There's some defensive line depth as well to add to this group. But I really like Pittsburgh. Really like this roster. The San Francisco 49ers get to have a little bit of fun here. Get to add Denzel Boston, wide receiver. He'll be the opposite Ricky Pearsall with Brandon Ayuk gone. Juwan Jennings potentially gone as well. You're going to need another wide receiver out there, even if you keep Juwan Jennings. And Denzel Boston has he's kind of like Kenyon Sadiq and Sonny Styles, where it's like you don't really know what his range is in this draft. He could be wide receiver 3 off the board. He could be wide receiver 7 off the board. It's a weird range. Trevor Gosby, tackle. He's another guy. He could be a sneaky first-round pick. Could sneak into the first round, potentially. So I think landing him here is awesome. Kenyatta Jackson, Tim Keenan, adding them to that defensive line, especially if Robert Saleh is back. Continue adding depth to the defensive line. Got to improve on that. Seattle really made that defensive line look amateurish. I know Nick Bosa's not there. I know Michael Williams, the first-round pick, isn't there. But you still need to perform better than that. Takario Davis, Amari Farrell, some corner and safety, defensive back depth. And Logan Taylor, someone to play there on the interior offensive line. Compete for a depth spot there. So, not a lot of open starting jobs, but a huge need, especially on the defensive side, for more depth. So I think they can land those key positions here with this draft class. Seattle comes in with the least amount of picks in the entire league this year with only 4. But with their first 3, I'm landing them 3 starters. Brandon Cisse will be a starting corner with Devon Witherspoon with Tariq Woolen gone. Chase Basantis, interior offensive lineman, he's going to start in one of those interior offensive line spots. Skylar Bell, different type of wide receiver. Him, JSN, I think, will be your 1 and 2 punch at wide receiver with Sam Darnold. Cooper Kupp probably still going to be there as well. Then you don't pick again until 213. You just add a guy to be depth at a position of value like the edge room. That's really all you can do. And wait till next year when you have more draft capital. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, at 15, everyone's like, Sonny Styles, Sonny Styles, Sonny Styles. I think that might be a little too... It might be a little too telegraphed. So I got him going with Avion Terrell. And then Deontay Lawson in the second round. Michael Trigg, the tight end from Baylor, in round 3. 3 guys can be instant impact. Starters at positions they really need. Akeem Mesidor, the other Miami edge player, I think could be sneaky good. Come in, be a depth guy off the edge for them. And then some depth guys for the offense. PJ Williams and Michael Boley on the offensive line. Ted Hurst from Georgia State, wide receiver. Watch out for Ted Hurst. Small school. No one's really heard of him. Watch him play, and you go, ooh. With Mike Evans and Chris Godwin getting a lot older, aging out. Really only got on Jalen McMillan at wide receiver with Emeka Ibuka, who looked really good in his rookie year for most of his rookie year. There's an opportunity, though, and look out for Ted Hurst if he ends up on this team. Look out for really any wide receiver that ends up on this team, especially if they add him in like day 3. That guy's going to have a huge opportunity with the way this roster is structured. Tennessee Titans, everyone's sort of yelling about defense. But Cam Ward has no weapons. None. Get him wide receiver 1. Get him Jordan Tyson. Tyson or Carnell Tate. One of the two. Whichever one is higher on your board, you take him. And you give your quarterback, your first overall pick quarterback from a year ago, a true wide receiver 1 to grow and develop with. Worry about defense on day 2. Because Romello Height, again, the edge class is so strong. Like, the wide receiver class is strong also. But you could get legit edge 1s on day 2. You can't really get the same results in the wide receiver room. There's like good wide receiver 2 types. There's a lot of those. Romello Height can come in and be edge 1. Day 1. D'Angelo Pons, undersized, but can come in, be a playmaker in your cornerback room, out of the slot. Jacarius Peak, tackle depth, can compete with Dan Moore for left tackle. Stanquan Clark, you need linebackers. Xavier Harris, a good depth interior guy. Mikel Kamara, a day 3 pick that could be a starter. That's how strong this edge class is. Getting Mikel Kamara at 184, he's a top 100 pick in a lot of other drafts. But there's so many strong edge players and wide receivers in this class. And then Jamari Taylor, depth running back. You kind of got to figure out that running back class. You know, Kenneth Walker's coming up. Breece Hall potentially coming up. You got to get a top-end running back 1, I think. But I think you should do that from a veteran perspective. And then look for depth behind that guy in the draft. And now the Washington Commanders, who don't have a second-round pick. But at pick 7, they're taking David Bailey off the edge. Their pass rush was terrible. Absolutely terrible. This is how you improve it. David Bailey, pure pass rusher off the edge. Probably not the best overall edge player, but I think his pass rush upside outweighs Ruben Bain, especially from a length perspective. So I think he goes first. Then you get Jonah Coleman, the running back from Washington. Him and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. You're hoping to find a running back one between the two of them. Some depth in the secondary with Keon Sabb and Christian Gray. Depth defensive line, Cole Brevard. And then Eric Rivers from Georgia Tech, a wide receiver. Looking to add another weapon out there. Would have loved to have added a tight end. It just didn't. The draft just didn't fall that way for the Commanders. So hopefully they'll be able to find one in the free agency period. And there it is. You don't even have to watch the draft. You don't even have to watch it. Go to sleep early. Don't worry about paying for whatever subscription it is that you get the NFL Network or ESPN on. Just go to this video again and be like, oh, well, that's how the draft worked out. Thanks for coming, guys. And we'll get into some more as we get some more head coaches coming in. We'll sort of be able to figure out what direction teams might be going as we get closer to April. But stay tuned. I'm still going to be working on that deep dive series. So subscribe at the very least to be ready for that when it drops down. Maybe we'll do a watch along with the draft in March, but it's still January. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video next time.